So over the weekend, I got a chance to play one of my most anticipated games of the year, Warhammer 40k Darktide, via the closed beta playtest. I can honestly say, from the hours that I put into the game, I cannot stop thinking about it. It's probably going to be one of the best Warhammer games that I have ever played, and probably one of the best reviewed ones, I should think. Without exaggeration, I've been thinking about this game and my time with the game when I've been away from it, and it's just fantastic. You may be thinking, oh, just another YouTuber hyping it up, you know, pre-game launch, all that type of stuff, but there is a part of you that would be correct, but I have some concerns. I have some likes that way outweigh the dislikes, and and if the game launches and it has a bunch of content as well, then I think this is going to be very good. My time with the playtest was fun, but it was kind of a dumbed down version of the game. I had a few crashes here and there because it is a playtest, it's a beta. I don't know how old the build is, and a lot of that stuff will probably get ironed out before launch. But with that being said, let's talk about the game and what I experienced. If you are unfamiliar with Darktide, a little background on the developers. They are Fat Shark Games. They're behind the games of Vermintide and Vermintide 2. So essentially, Vermintide and Vermintide 2 are in the Warhammer Fantasy universe, and they are bringing it over to the Darktide universe, which is the Warhammer 40k. This is going to be taking everything that they've learned from those previous two outings and putting it into the dark universe of 40k, which is just fantastic. And Darktide simply isn't just a copy and paste with a new difficulty setting and a different setting altogether. It adds a lot more. It adds more to combat. It adds visually stunning levels that make me immerse myself into the world so much, and a whole lot more. You start out by making a reject, which is like your main character for the game. You get to pick between 4 classes. There is the Brawler, which is the Zealot. There's a Mage style class, which are known as the Psychers. There's the typical Sharpshooter, run and gun style, which is the Sharpshooter. And then there's the very tanky Ogrin. Each of the classes have their own playstyle, passive abilities, unique weapons and such, and the really cool feature is that, just to me at least, is that you can give your character a backstory. You can have a, where did you come from, a distinguished past if you were kicked out of the military, the Astra Militarum or anything like that. And once you've done all that, you can go into the training mode. This will teach you the controls, the advanced stuff that you need, and then you go straight into the Morning Star, which I think is probably one of the underrated areas of the game that I haven't heard too many people talk about, but it's just the opening hub of the game. It's essentially where you'll get your missions, your gear. You'll also level, go to different vendors and such. Maybe there's some secrets and stuff around there, but it's absolutely beautiful. You can walk around it in third person, so you get to see your reject, and it is going to have other players. It's like a social space, so think Destiny 2 in the tower, or like the main hub in the Division. After that, you're going to jump into some missions, and that's going to be the core gameplay loop. There's 12 different types of missions in the full game, but we only had about 4 different types in the playtest, I believe. They have varying difficulties, and then sometimes if you'll replay a mission or a different type of mission, it will have, side objectives, collecting scrolls or tomes, and there will also be different modifiers which can alter repeat playthroughs of certain missions. And the mission structure is pretty much you navigate through these huge levels which are stunning. I'll go on more about that in a little later on in the video. You'll kill a bunch of enemies, whether that's kill a target, activate a piece of equipment, or just do various other tasks that are the main objective. And it doesn't hamstring you with a full-on objective. You just keep moving forward in these missions, and I really like that. You kind of can go at it at your own pace. There is an end objective, and there'll be a bunch of enemies that you have to fight along the way. There's different ways to navigate through the levels, but ultimately it will eventually get to the point where you finish the mission. When you've beaten the mission, you go back to the Morning Star, you get your loot, you get your progression, your XP, you also get some gear as well, and then you can go back to the Morning Star essentially and rinse and repeat the entire process. I can't commit too much on the progression in the game, as it was an early build and I didn't get to play too many hours due to real life work commitments, but I know that you're going to be able to have different upgrade paths for each of the classes, such as traits and improving your passive abilities and such, maybe an extra ability if you can get them. But from what I've seen, it was kind of slow in the beta test from some videos that I've been watching around. So yeah, you'll have to take that with a little pinch of salt and see how it is when the full game launches. Now you understand the basic loop, let's talk about the best parts of Darktide, because this gameplay and the game is super satisfying and I can't wait to get my hands on the full launch of it. Combat is at front and center, and it feels so satisfying just cutting through hordes of enemies and different types of enemies. It just feels so visceral and it feels like you're in the 40k universe. Feeling is a word I use a lot when I want to describe this game. But not only does the melee combat feel quite tight, the shooting and the gunplay is amazingly well done for a company's first real attempt at doing gunplay. They said they had to go back to the drawing board and rework a bunch of how the game would work, how the enemies would react, doing range to you, range to them, that type of thing. But it was really, really satisfying. It's the small things that make me smile so much when, like, you're running around, you have a stamina bar, but when you're doing melee attacks, whether that's light or heavy, you don't drain stamina. And so many times I've played a bunch of melee games where if you have low stamina, you end up just swinging slow. Now, I know that's more of an immersive experience, but especially when there's just hordes and hordes of enemies and you need to be moving around a lot, it feels more as an enhancement than a hindrance when it comes to not having to worry about your stamina only when you are running. I got to experience most of the combat as the Ogrin, which is just a massive, tanky, brutish race in the world of 40k, but also they kind of dwarf enemies and also the other characters around them. They're a lot taller, so it's cool to see a different perspective when you are playing. And the other thing that I like about it is you feel like you're playing your role, which I was very tanky. I can swing wildly, combining it with like blocks and heavy and light attacks. And the other thing that was great was just having the ability to replenish your toughness whenever you would get kills with melee, and then the combination of that with the shooting. But I did get to play a little bit with the veteran sharpshooter, and the gunplay on that was very nice as well. All I can say is this is probably one of the best feeling horde combats I've played in a long time. Fat Shark absolutely nailed it. As for enemy variety, there was a lot here. There was different types of enemies that would cause you problems and you'd have to react to on the fly. Each enemy had their own unique sound cue, which would kind of give you a hint at what it was that you'd be fighting. You had your regular horde mobs, which is like chaos infected type zombies essentially. You had your grenadiers, you had Gatling gunners and snipers, riflemen, bombers. There was these dogs, these mutant dogs that would run around and pin you down, and your teammates would have to get you off. The same with these trappers as well, which would fire you in like an electrified net, so you'd have to be gotten out by your teammates. And then there was also a variety of flamers, I think regular flamers, and then there was like a green flame, which is probably like chaos flame or something like that. And then there was also mini bosses. Now there is going to be more mini bosses in the full launch of the game, but the only one that we got to see was the Plague Ogrin, and that one was a lot of fun to fight. He was this big, bullish, and he could just knock you around the map. He knocked me off a couple of times into just a death because I was standing on like a platform, and this platform had an edge which led to lava or whatever it was, and he just knocked me off, and I was kind of just there like, let's not take this guy too lightly next time. But there was just enough enemies to add to each of the combat encounters. I really enjoyed just the different varieties. Even some of just the big brutish enemies that had shields that you'd have to go around and obviously do damage to them. There was also these guys that had these axes that would have revving or chain axes on them, which was pretty cool. But overall, you're going to have plenty of enemies to turn to mulch. One hope that I do have, which is just way off in the distance for a DLC, would be extra faction mobs or something like Tyranids or Chaos Demons. That would be super awesome to try and hopefully go as like an expansion for the game. I'd love to see that in future, but that's way after the game's launched. I can't talk too much about the classes as I mainly played as the Ogrin, and I didn't get a lot of time to upgrade them because of the progression system in the game, but also I didn't get a lot of time to play over the weekend, sadly. But they all have unique traits, more stamina or toughness depending on your playstyle. So I had a lot more stamina, a lot more health being a big brutish tank as the Ogrin. But I also had the added effect that I would be able to do more like up close and personal melee damage as well. I know that on the Zealot, you could use an ability which allowed you to get your toughness back. But the cool thing I liked about the Ogrin is that the gun that he got to use was literally firing like a can of beans as this shotgun round. He would just load this massive shell into a shotgun and just fire it out, and it was just awesome. And what I do know is each class tree will have a trait that they can upgrade, and they also have passives, and they'll probably add more things such as recharge rate to toughness, critical hits, like chance and how that goes. But I didn't obviously get to experience too much of it because I was busy. The last thing I want to talk about is the level design, the visual design, and the sound design of this game, because Darktide and Fact Shark is just absolutely killing it here. It feels like I'm a part of the 40k universe. The levels are just awesome. The sheer scope and like how big they are and how beautiful they are, even though they are gritty, disgusting, and it just shows off the brutal nature of these hive cities. You can feel how like desperate the city is and just the dread as you're playing along. Even just looking at some of the visuals of the characters and the enemies that we're going up against, and the sounds when you're slashing them up, firing the weapons when enemies are attacking you. Even just the scope of it when you look at the background or the skybox and the area around it that isn't even interactable. It just looks like there's a lot of attention to detail being put in there. And the levels themselves are big enough that give you enough room to breathe and use all of your abilities and move around and have some fun things to do. I wish there was a little bit more interactivity with the world, so you could maybe push barrels into certain directions or do something different apart from just like shoot a stationary barrel. But that's like a minor gripe. I also really love the in-game banter that the characters would have. Obviously, you are creating your own characters here, and they would have like this back and forth between each other based on some of the choices that you'd make when creating them. And it was quite funny at times. You got to have a little bit of a laugh, and you got to see how kind of desperate the whole world is of 40k and just how, you know, downtrodden everybody is. And it was kind of funny at times. This is just everything that I've wanted from a 40k game, and it's amazing. I've loved every second that I've been able to play in the beta and what I've got to see so far. My only concerns with the game though is that it's going to be a little bit framey, I think, on consoles. I'm not too sure. I played it on PC. There's no crossplay on launch, so that might hinder some things, especially between the Xbox Game Pass and the regular Game Pass. I'm not too sure if there's going to be co-op there. Hopefully they add that just for the sake of the player base and the populations. I also did like the fact that there's matchmaking in this, which would just put you into a quick play mode on whatever difficulty, and you get put with people. Even if you got kicked out, you go up against bot players or have bot players on your team. And how they support this after the launch of the game is going to be key. How they add new updates and stuff, how they patch it, is all going to be up for debate until we actually get our hands on it. But I can honestly say, hold this to me right now, this is one of the best Warhammer games I've ever played. Combat is great, visual, sound design, phenomenal, just fun all around. The in-game banter is great, and I love how awesome this game is. Darktide is wonderful, and this is just the beta, and I can't wait for the full release next month in November. But there's my hands-on impressions of Darktide from the playtest over the weekend. I wanted to wait until the playtest had kind of finished to give my overall thoughts on it. And yeah, I've loved every second that I've played of it, and I highly recommend that you stay tuned for more content of it on the channel. If you do like the video, subscribe and turn on the notification bell as well. Really helps out the channel, and check out all the links in the description. This has been Jimbo, and I'll see you guys next time.